Hello, everyone. Even though we are in chapter 21 now, it is very interesting that the Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, when he started writing the laws of Shabbat, which is actually the second tractate in the Talmud. In the Mishnah, there's the whole tractate, the whole order of Zraim. So there's quite a few Mishnayot, but in the Talmud, it's only Brachot and immediately Shabbat. So when he started writing the Halachot of the Mishnah of Shabbat, he actually started with carrying in Shabbat on Shabbat between domains, and it's very curious, but I don't have a very good answer for that. But Rav Smotrich, 27 years ago, when we started learning Shabbat in Bet Moriah, he actually gave a very deep philosophical idea about how we should read this Mishnah in the most, I think, tragic way. And so let me explain. So it says Yitziot Shabbat Shtayim Shen Arba, so that there's four different ways of carrying on Shabbat. And the Mishnah immediately goes to this description. So a little bit of background. We're talking on Shabbat. So this poor person is standing outside of somebody's house and he's begging for food. And this is a place without an eruv, so this is he's standing in the public domain, and the Baal Habayit, the owner of the house, is inside the house in Reshut Yachid. And so Pashat Ani et Yado Ifnim v'natan toch Yado shel Baal Habayit. So if the poor person put his hand into the through the window, at those times we didn't have glass. Usually it was just an opening. Sometimes they had some kind of screen or curtain, but it was really an open space. And he put his hand into the hand of the owner who he took food out of the hand of the owner into his, and so he carried it from the property, from the private property, from the private domain into the public domain. He'ani chayav u'ba'al habayit patur. The poor person is liable for breaking Shabbat because he carried from the private domain to the public domain, and Baal Habayit patur, the owner is exempt because he didn't actually leave the house. He didn't even extend his hand out. But the opposite is, of course, where Pashat Baal Habayit et yado lachutz v'natan toch yado shel ani. So the owner extended his hand outside into the public domain and put something into the hand of the poor. Obviously, we're not talking about money because money is muktzeh. We're talking about food. Or he took something from the poor person's hand, like a basket or something like that, in order to place in it the food, and he put it in because he carried now from the public domain into the private domain, or vice versa. Baal Bayit chayav ve'ani patur. The owner is liable for breaking Shabbat, but the poor person is patur. So why am I saying tragic? Because Rav Smotrich pointed out that how terrible would it be that somebody is looking for food on Shabbat and they don't even have we're not even talking about the three meals that we talked about. We're talking about probably Shabbos morning or Shabbos afternoon, and he's going door to door asking for people for food. And what Rabbi Smotrich said was that Rabbi Yehuda was giving us a very hidden criticism, which is they should have just invited the poor person in. That way, nobody will be liable. If the ani was invited in for a meal, it doesn't matter if we already finished the meal, we probably have some leftovers. So you invite him in and you don't let him stand outside like that and begging for food through the window. Not because of the embarrassment. He's obviously not embarrassed to go door to door for food, but rather because it's a responsibility of a Jewish person to have hospitality and not just give something into the hand of the poor person who's standing outside. So I just wanted to share that because it will always stick with me that this rebuke. I'm not saying that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said that everybody does that. It's just that it is tragic if even once that's what happens. So now we will go into the explanation of the prohibition of hotzah. So this is actually just a little bit more detail about the process. So we have seen that the prohibition of hotzah applies to carrying objects from a reshut yachid to a reshut rabim or kamerlit, which rabbinically is considered a reshut rabim, and vice versa. We have also seen that it is prohibited for one to carry an object 4 amot, approximately 6 feet, within a reshut rabim or a karmelit. Now let us see more precisely how this prohibition is defined. The melacha of hotzah has 3 stages. One, picking up an object in one domain, so it's called Akira, literally uprooting. And second, transporting it to a different domain, ha'avara, from the word over. We also said that in Mariv Aravim, we transfer from the sun and the moon, from the sun to going into the moon. And the third stage is putting it down in that new domain, Hanacha, from the word le'aniach, just like we say le'aniach tefillin, it means to place. Even if one accomplishes all 3 of these with one action, for example, by throwing an object from a reshut yachid to a reshut rabim, or throwing it 4 amot within a reshut rabim, he has violated hotzah. Similarly, if one is holding an object or has one in his pocket as he walks from a reshut yachid to a reshut rabim, he violates hotzah, even though he didn't pick it up, it's already in his pocket. When he begins to walk, he technically uproots the object. When he walks from one domain to the other, he transports it to a different domain, and when he stops walking in the second domain, he is putting it down. So the reason why it is important to explain that is because in the old days, people's pockets were not usually part of their dress because just like women's dresses usually don't have pockets, the men also wore a longer tunic or dress or jalabia in the Arab countries, and so there were no pockets, and the word pants is just like the British pants, which is the underpants. So the question was, if you are attaching a pocket or a wallet to your belt, that is definitely forbidden. But necklaces, the Mishnah and the Gemara discuss every single kind of jewelry or piece of clothing, and the main question is, are this is this person likely to remove this object to show it to their friend? I just got a new necklace or a ring. Do you take off the ring to show them? Usually not. That's just one example. You usually just show the finger with the ring on it. You don't take it off. The same with earrings, and the same with most necklaces. And so, where we don't have an eruv here in Fredericton, the key for the shul I carry as part of my lanyard, and so I never do these 3 stages at all. I don't even take it off until we're inside the shul. So, in order to transgress a Torah prohibition, one person must complete all 3 stages. Thus, if one picks up an item in Reshut Yachid and extends his arm with the item, like we just saw in the Mishnah, into Reshut Rabim, he is not transgressed by Torah law unless he puts down the item in the Reshut Rabim, like in the per person's basket. If someone else standing in the Reshut Rabim removes the item from his hand, the item has been transported from a Reshut Yachid to a Reshut Rabim, but neither person has performed an entire melacha by Torah law, since the first person performed Akira and Ha'avara, while the second person only performed the Hanacha. So that's the Torah law, but because we were reading the Mishnah does extend the prohibition because we have a fence. Sages nevertheless prohibited transporting objects in this way, lest people circumvent the Torah prohibition, grow accustomed to taking it lightly, and ultimately transgress Torah law by performing all 3 stages. And again, the suggestion is just to invite the person in, and that way nobody has to even consider that I'm only doing part of the transporting. It is important to be aware that according to Torah law, the prohibition of hotza'ah applies only when it is performed in the usual fashion. For example, if one takes an item in his hand, slips it in his pocket, or puts it in his backpack, he is carrying normally and is thus transgressing Torah law. In contrast, if he uses a shinui, such as carrying a handkerchief in his shoe or on his head, he has not violated Torah law. Nevertheless, the sages prohibited carrying with a shinui, lest people end up carrying without a shinui. He's not mentioning here, but you should also remember that a person's head might be considered a makom patur, so we're not going to get into that. In some, the Torah prohibition of hotza'ah is limited to the performance of the entire melacha by one individual in the way it is normally done during the week. Additionally, the sages prohibited any action that causes the same result as the melacha, even if it is done with a shinui or undertaken by more than one person. If the goal is accomplished, transferring the item to the desired place, the action is prohibited. It is important to note that even in a Carmelite, the sages prohibited carrying an item with a shinui or by more than one person, except for under special circumstances. So I'll just give maybe the most gory, since we started with something that was negative. If somebody passes away, God forbid, and we're obviously not going to bury the person on Shabbat, if we leave the body in the house, it would start smelling. The rabbis allowed taking the body out, first of all, on a shinui, and second of all, with making the person basis of the davar mutar, a loud object be put on this cadaver and carried out. But again, there was what's called Torah Gadol. There's also other examples relating to mitzvah or for Torah Rabim, the need of the many. And we will stop here and open up for questions.